Tardes a todos. Es obvio que tuvimos algunas dificultades técnicas. Aparentemente ya todo está funcionando bien. Les damos gracias por su paciencia y estamos aquí para compartir con ustedes algunas cosas. Voy a comenzar por introducir o presentarles a Iñigo. Iñigo es un gran amigo y compañero. Él ha sido, además de primero un gran vendedor en Europa y en los Estados Unidos de América, decidió cambiar darle un pequeño giro a su profesión y empezó a ser capacitador y consultor. Y ahora se dedica a trabajar con el recurso humano para aumentar su talento y compartir con nosotros unas grandes experiencias, especialmente en el tema de propósito, que es algo muy importante en nuestras vidas. Te cedo la palabra, Iñigo.
Muy buenas tardes. Primero, disculparnos por el problema técnico, estas cosas pasan y apreciamos su paciencia. Bueno, antes de presentar a Britt, quería presentar a Margarita, por supuesto. Margarita Lozano es colega mía, es consultora mexicana y norteamericana. Ambos somos, uno mexicano y norteamericano, el otro español y norteamericano. Es una gran profesional, es licenciada, maestra, doctorado en administración y educación, y sobre todo tiene una gran pasión por el desarrollo de las personas. Ha sido una gran voluntaria en ATD, en SHRM, en las dos asociaciones que yo he trabajado. Y bueno, es un placer estar con ella hoy, y encima tenemos el placer de tener a la doctora Britt Andreatta. Britt, bienvenida. Gracias por compartir tu tiempo con nosotros en español. Vamos a hacer un mix. Acabo de estar en un evento en el International, en el Banco Interamericano, y el evento era completamente bilingüe. Y estaba pensando, esto es lo que vamos a hacer en este evento, ¿no? Entonces, presentaros a Britt. Britt es una thought leader, es una líder de pensamiento internacional, con su background es el liderazgo, es una apasionada de la neurociencia, pero sobre todo es una apasionada de ayudar a las organizaciones y a los individuos a mejorar, a sacar su mayor potencial. Y qué mejor regalo que nos ha traído, que es su gran libro, uno de sus 3 libros, y está escribiendo el cuarto, que sabemos que está escribiendo el 4º libro, pero uno de sus libros que para mí es una guía. Fijaros, yo lo tengo en inglés y lo tengo todo señalado. Es una perfecta guía de cómo gestionar el cambio. Bueno, pues hoy vamos a hablar de gestión de cambio y vamos a compartiros cositas sobre el libro, y permitidme que le ceda la palabra a Margarita para que comencemos con Britt. Britt, bienvenida y gracias.
Gracias. Bueno, ahora ya tienen un poquito de idea, pero algunos de ustedes se preguntarán, bueno, ¿y quién es Britt Andreatta? ¿Por qué ella se interesó en esto? ¿Y qué tiene que ofrecer al mundo de los negocios? Entonces, esa es nuestra primera pregunta para Britt. Please, Britt, let us know who you are and what are you going to give to the business world, what the business community can get from you.
Thank you so much, and so lovely to connect with everyone today. My career now is I work as an author and a speaker, and I focus on the brain science of success. So I look at different common business challenges like change, or creating great teams, or building wonderful learning programs, or leadership development from a lens of neuroscience and science-based practices. So I've been doing that for a while now. I'm the former chief learning officer for lynda.com, which is now LinkedIn Learning. And I work with clients all over the world, global clients from all kinds of industries. And now we also provide training solutions. So I kept building similar programs for my clients that were brain-based and based on my books and research. And then realized after several people called and said, hey, do you have any training? I realized it was something I could make available to a wider audience. So now I write books, I speak at conferences and events, and we have training solutions that my team can roll out in your organization, or learning professionals can get certified, or independent consultants can get certified and roll the same training out with their clients.
Y créanme, sus proyectos, sus cursos son maravillosos, se aprende muchísimo y se descubren cosas muy, muy interesantes. Iñigo, por favor.
Y sobre todo, los que nos gustan las cosas prácticas, a mí me encanta siempre, desde que conocí a Britt hace más de 7 años y la llevo siguiendo y empezamos a colaborar, me encanta la practicidad. Britt aterriza los conceptos, es capaz de aterrizarnos los conceptos. Bueno, Britt, ¿cuáles son los principales errores al gestionar el cambio? What are the biggest mistakes people make when leading change?
Yes, I would say that there's 3 main ones that I've seen through both my consulting work and my research. The first one is only focusing on the change itself. So spending a lot of time designing the change and building the rollout plan and communications and the plan to execute, and not focusing on supporting people in how they will react to change. Our biology is that we are wired to see change as potential danger and to resist it until we get more information. And so when you focus on helping whoever's going through the change, that might be your employees or your customers, supporting them in that biological journey to finally accepting and moving forward with change, ignoring that or not having a plan for that. So that's the first mistake. The second mistake is not mapping your changes, because change gets launched in the organization all the time from a lot of different parts of the business. And then, of course, the world also happens. Nobody was planning for a global pandemic, and yet that was a huge change that everyone had to move through. So mapping your changes and figuring out what is launching when and where are they going to maybe interfere with each other, or when are your people going to have a whole bunch of changes rolling out at the same time. It gives you a lot of data. And when you see it mapped on a sheet of paper, you can start to anticipate the problems and make different choices. So that would be the second one. And then the third one is not giving people the training that they need to successfully move through that change. Most change requires people to not only develop some kind of new skill or habit, but it's usually asking them to leave one behind that they're very good at or comfortable with. And we know that it takes 40 to 50 repetitions for people to develop a new habit. And so you need to provide training. You need to give people the chance to learn and practice that skill so they are ready to go on launch day, as opposed to it being very chaotic and messy and people making a lot of mistakes. So those would be the 3 that I say cause the most problems or damage, which is why 50 to 70% of all change initiatives fail, is that some element is not being taken account for, even though a lot of research and time is being put into that change.
Muy bien, Britt, es muy interesante lo que acabas de compartirnos y me gustaría enfocarme un poco en el punto número 2, porque después de leer tu libro y de traducir buena parte de él, creo que es una de las cosas que más me llamaron la atención y que a la gente le pueden sonar interesantes. ¿Qué se entiende por fatiga debido al cambio y qué implicaciones tiene en los lugares de trabajo? What is change fatigue and how prevalent is it today in workplaces, please?
Yes, thank you. So change fatigue is what happens when a whole bunch of changes are coming at us very fast, and we don't have time to settle into the new normal and get comfortable before we're hit with another change. And so what happens in a lot of organizations is they're just rolling out so much change, and people are constantly trying to keep up with it, and they develop change fatigue. Before the pandemic, it was estimated, in fact, senior executives, 47% of senior executives felt that change fatigue was prevalent in their organization. We know that the pandemic itself, not only the virus and lockdowns and masking and all of that created change, but many organizations pivoted to working from home and new online collaboration tools. So regardless of all the change that was already happening in that place of business, there was a whole lot more change. And in fact, during the Great Resignation, too much organizational change was the number 2 reason people gave for leaving their job for another one. The number 1 reason was burnout. And burnout is kind of like change fatigue, exponentially bigger. People were just not having time. They were overworking and under resting. And recent studies have shown that about 77% of workers today, January 2023, are experiencing burnout, which is a level of really intense exhaustion, lowered productivity, inability to be flexible with things that are happening. So I would say it's always a bit of a problem, but right now where we are in this timeline of the world, it's an exceptional problem right now.
Interesante, fijaros. Burnout, desgaste y además la fatiga del cambio. Bueno, Britt, ¿y por qué y cómo creaste el modelo Change Quest? Why and how did you end up creating this model, right?
Yeah, so the impetus for me was I was already certified in the other change models. I was a learning professional and I was rolling out those other models in trainings, including the company I worked with at the time, which was lynda.com. And then we were acquired by LinkedIn to become LinkedIn Learning. And even though I had a very positive experience, first of all, I kept my job in that transition, and I was going to work with a company I greatly admired for a CEO that I really greatly admired. I realized that none of the change models were actually helping me or my colleagues go through what was happening. And so I had just written the book, Wired to Grow, which is all about how the brain learns. And I thought, I wonder what neuroscience says about change. So I started researching it for my own sanity to kind of get through that journey. And then I realized there was a lot of amazing data there that really gave us some new ways of helping people move through change. And I was using that with my own clients. It turned into the book Wired to Resist, which is now in Spanish and Portuguese. And then people started calling saying, I've read the book. Do you have training? We want to roll this out in your organization. So the Change Quest model was in the book and was what kind of came out of after looking at all the research. We needed a new model for understanding change. And then the training came when people said, yes, we want this. And how do we roll it out in our organization?
Gracias, Britt. Ahora bien, tú has hablado ya del curso y del programa de capacitación. Nosotros tenemos ya la ventaja de tener el libro Programados para Resistir en español, y esa es una maravilla. Sin embargo, me gustaría que nos platicaras un poquito cuáles son las ventajas y desventajas entre el curso y el libro, por favor.
That's a great question. So the content is similar. You're going to get my research and the background of what led me to create the model. But the book goes into more details of the studies. So, for example, if I tell you, what we know about the emotions that come up in change, in the book, I'll list 3 or 4 studies and describe those studies. And so if you want to dig into the science or you like learning about some of those kinds of details, you'll get more of those details in the book. With the training, you still get all the major concepts, but in the training, we spend our time with hands-on practice. You're going to literally be practicing applying the concepts to your current change, your current organization, your current teams. And so we spend a lot of time with you, the learners, actually using the tools so they can drive change more effectively. If you read the book, could you do that for yourself? Yes, you can read the tips and strategies and make yourself practice them. But in the training, we make that part of the time, and you actually do it with the group of learners you're with, so your colleagues or other people in your organization.
Bien, está muy bien, Britt, pero ¿para quién es este modelo? ¿Está dirigido a cualquier persona? ¿Cualquier persona puede tomar el modelo y aprender sobre transitar cambios, resistirse al cambio, gestionar cambios, diseñar cambios?
Yeah, I mean, change is something that happens in the whole organization. So both the book and the training address, are you on the receiving end of change? I call them the travelers, because sometimes they're your employees, sometimes they're your customers, sometimes they're your stakeholders. But then you also have the other kind of roles in that organization. And the whole thing is done around a metaphor of hiking or mountain climbing. So the next audience that's in both the book and the training is what I call the guides. They're typically the managers who are responsible for taking their direct reports through a change, but they may not have a lot of control over what that change looks like. And then the two top levels are the senior executives. I call them the expedition designers. They're the ones who really decide that change is needed and what change will happen in the organization. And then they typically hand it off to a second audience. I call them trailblazers, but they're the people in the organization who'll be responsible for setting that change up to happen. So for example, if you were changing software, your IT team would be the trailblazers. They would be doing a lot of work in the background to get that change ready to happen. And then when it's launched, the managers would be taking all of their people through making that transition. If you're doing a reorganization, HR is the team that's trailblazing that in the background. So there's essentially 4 levels of audience, and both the book and the training have tips and strategies and tools for all of them. In an ideal world, the whole organization is using this language and using the tools and creating a coordinated effort. But we've seen great success even with picking one audience and starting there and helping them do their part of change more effectively.
Definitivamente es maravillosa la manera en la que involucras a toda la organización en estos procesos de cambio, porque efectivamente todos tienen que participar y apoyar este tipo de iniciativas. Sin embargo, ¿puedes compartirnos, por favor, algunas ideas prácticas para gestionar los cambios con éxito en las organizaciones?
Yes, so you said kind of driving change, so I'm going to focus on the leaders. I think the most important thing is to give the why of the change. Leaders really know the reason behind why they think this is necessary, and they've done a lot of thinking about it, and they've designed the change. But oftentimes when the change is announced, the why is not given, or they think it is, but it's not clear to the rest of the organization. So really focus on the why and really focus on what will be gained, what will be better as a result of the change, because change is hard, change is frustrating. So you want to keep people focused on what good will come from the change. So that's one aspect. That includes having a communication strategy that really gets the message through the whole organization and doesn't get stopped at certain bottlenecks. It also means you have to say the same thing over and over and over again. When you're leading change well, you should feel like a broken record. And so that would be the first strategy. The second one I would tell leaders is plan for resistance. People are not being difficult, they're being human. We are wired to see change as danger, and we are wired to go through some negative emotions and some complaining before we get on board. So leaders should never be surprised by that. You should plan for that and actually use tools to help people move through that more effectively. That includes communicating, that includes providing training, that includes making sure your managers have the skill sets they need to help people stay motivated. The third thing I would recommend is when a business grows, you start to have change getting launched by lots of different departments. So facilities is doing great work and they're launching changes, and HR is doing great work and they're launching changes. Product is launching changes, marketing is launching changes. And so what happens is you really need it. I call it an air traffic controller. There's somebody who has the big picture and is looking at, oh, look, all these changes are coming, because oftentimes what causes problems is really good changes launched simultaneously, and people did not have the bandwidth or the support to do both of them well. So having that air traffic controller then allows the senior leaders to make choices around timing, bundling changes together, looking at the fact that one team is going through a lot, so maybe they should be the last group to go through that change instead of the first. I think that's really important, particularly in today's world where change is just such a constant. And then the last one is, this has to do with a very specific way our brain responds to things. We have a brain structure called the habenula that tracks failure and uses chemical guardrails, essentially cutting off serotonin and dopamine, the chemicals that make us feel good, when we've made a mistake. So typically when change is rolled out, very rarely is it on time and on budget. So your team has done an amazing job. They've accomplished so much, but the meeting looks like, oh my gosh, we're late and we're over budget and what's wrong and this is terrible and what are we going to do? And this part of the brain, even though people did really good stuff, starts coding change as this real bummer and this real negative experience. And so we actually get more resistant to change over time unless our leaders do this one really important strategy, which is to celebrate effort and progress. So that same staff meeting should say, hey, everyone, great job. We did this and this and this and this. Applause, high fives all around. We did some great work. Now we are over budget and behind schedule. What are we going to do to hustle to fix it? So you still hold people to a high standard, but you celebrate effort and progress first, and it makes a huge difference in how people feel about change.
So, lo podríamos resumir es, enfócate en el propósito de ese cambio, planea la resistencia al cambio, sé un agente de cambio, genera agentes de cambio dentro de las organizaciones y celebra el esfuerzo que están haciendo tu equipo, ¿no? en transitar ese cambio.
Sí, pero algo muy importante, Iñigo, también el ver el progreso de la gente, no nada más el esperar a llegar hasta el final para celebrar, ir viendo que paso a paso van teniendo logros importantes y aplaudirles esos logros, apoyarlos para que continúen por el proceso, ¿no?
¿Tenemos alguna pregunta en el chat, Margarita?
Hasta ahorita no lo sé, déjame revisar por aquí, sí tenemos algunos comentarios. Pero no veo preguntas. Es el momento para que si alguien quiere poner alguna pregunta por ahí, nos la agreguen. Y Britt, esto ha sido muy interesante en lo que las personas ponen sus preguntas. Me gustaría recordarles que ya tenemos el libro Programados para Resistir en español. Lo pueden encontrar en la página de Britt o en Amazon y comprarlo a través de esas vías. Es un libro impresionantemente recomendable, además de que no es un ladrillote, es un libro pequeñito, pero muy valioso. Créanme que página por página encuentran cosas maravillosas en él y cosas que pueden aplicar inmediatamente, porque como bien dijo Iñigo hace un momento, esto es algo que va a la práctica de inmediato. No tienen que hacer cosas muy elaboradas para poderlo aplicar.
¿Algún pensamiento final? Any final thought, Britt, that you can give us any other additional tip for driving change?
Not for driving change, but let me give a tip for when you're on the receiving end of change, because all of us go through that in our lives at some point. I'm on the receiving end of it right now because my teenager is learning to drive, and that's a whole journey of itself. Change is stressful on us. We worry a lot. There's a lot to keep track of. We may not be good at something. So I really encourage you to dial up self-care proportionally to the amount of change you're dealing with. So getting better sleep, eating healthier, doing calming things. I cannot underscore enough the power of meditation or a mindfulness practice. It literally changes the brain permanently. And so it'll make you more calm and adaptive with change. So that would be a really important strategy. And also just, when we stress out, we tend to cut out fun from our lives. We tend to eat poorly. We don't sleep as well. And that makes change harder. So think about, for change, dial up self-care. If you got a lot of change, even more self-care. And that will help you navigate it.
They're asking us if the book is being translated in French.
Not yet. It has been translated into Russian, Portuguese, and Spanish at this point in time. But we do have the training. The training is available in French. So if people are interested in the Change Quest training in French, reach out to us. We do have that as something that people can use in their organizations.
Y tienes también el training en español. O sea que para todos aquellos que nos estáis escuchando de Latinoamérica, de España, tenéis la posibilidad de entrenar a vuestros líderes, a vuestros managers y a vuestros empleados en el modelo Change Quest, en conquista del cambio que elaboró Britt. Margarita, ¿alguna cosa final que podamos decir a la audiencia?
Pues realmente decirles que sabemos que han hecho muchos esfuerzos por cambiar cosas, sabemos que muchos de esos esfuerzos han sido costosos en esfuerzo, en tiempo y muchas veces en dinero, muy, muy costosos y no los han llevado a lo que ustedes deseaban. Si quieren mejorar todos esos factores, si quieren realizar algún cambio en su organización y hacerlo con éxito, por favor, volteen y miren este programa. Tenemos disponibles para ustedes el libro, la capacitación en inglés a través de la plataforma de Britt y también se las podemos dar en español si ustedes así la requieren. No lo olviden, acérquense a nosotros y van a ver resultados impresionantemente buenos al aplicar este modelo y ya lo hemos aplicado, se los puedo garantizar.
Pues nada más, teníamos ahí una pregunta más. Can we take one more question, Britt? Yeah?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So what do you find the most important topics to tackle in trainings, supporting changes within companies, going through transformation?
Yes, so two things. You know, the research I did on how the body responds to change, I like to give people kind of an overview of this is what change creates in people emotionally and physically. This is kind of how you're going to predict resistance. And then, so giving people kind of the why, so they understand what's happening. I think when we're given the why, we have that moment of going, oh yeah, I've experienced that, or I've seen that, or oh, so that's what's going on. And giving people the why allows them to use that information and customize it to their culture and context. The second thing is people need real strategies they can use right away. So one of the things that's really important to me in all the trainings that I build is that people literally have tools that they could walk out the door and use immediately. They've got strategies and tips and tricks that they can implement immediately and get some relief and get some support. So I think training needs to give people the bigger picture and also real applicable tools, and that they get to practice those tools in a safe environment. When they go out to use it in the real world, it's not uncomfortable or confusing.
One more question. The same person, Judy. Also, what are the topics and skills that are truly hard to develop supporting transformations, right, in organizations?
You know, I am a big believer, and honestly, my whole first book on Wired to Grow, our brain is built to learn, and we learn and we build new neural pathways up until the moment of death. So we are learning creatures, but where we get in trouble is sometimes we're not supported in getting the right tools or the right information. So yeah, Margarita's holding up the new edition of Wired to Grow. It's got a lot of great information in it. So if you like to learn for yourselves or you create learning for others, I highly recommend that. So I really believe that people can absolutely gain new skills and strategies around change. I think the problem is if people aren't asked to, or they're not supported in doing it, that's where things can be problematic. And it's kind of shocking. There's the statistic, 50 to 70% of change initiatives fail. And the number of organizations that provide change training is very small. And yet change, going through change, leading change, designing and driving change are all skill sets. And people absolutely can learn how to do those things better and apply them to their organization. And we've seen really amazing results in the organizations we've rolled change training out in.
Y lo interesante es que es una de las skills que todos los directivos y managers necesitan, ¿no? Hacia el futuro. Todos los reportes de McKinsey, de Conferry, te hablan de cómo manejar el cambio. Es interesante.
Y a eso voy, Íñigo, con el siguiente comentario. Muchas veces pensamos solamente en estos procesos de cambio como toda la organización. Pero si nosotros nos vamos a nuestra propia persona, a nuestra propia casa, a nuestro propio grupo de amigos, de cosas, los cambios los vivimos todos y muchas veces igual fracasamos. ¿Cuántas veces hacemos las listas decembrinas de mis propósitos para el siguiente año y acabamos al final del año con lo mismo de siempre? Si realmente queremos lograr los cambios y lograrlos con éxito y con mucho menos esfuerzo, este programa es fantástico para ello. Se goza, se vive y se tiene el éxito al final. No se lo pierdan. Es fantástico.
I want to add one more thing. The one training that I see out there in the world, which is amazing, ProSci has the ADKAR model, and it's fantastic. I've used it myself, but it really lives on the side of when you're designing change and how to execute your change plan. It's a really good tool. And we've had a lot of people be using ADKAR and then bring on Change Quest, because Change Quest is all about the people side. How do you give people the tools and strategies to do that plan that you want them to do? So Change Quest plays really nicely with other change models you might be using, but it's really focused on the human side and getting folks to do the things that you need them to do for it to be successful.
Sí, yo agregaría, Britt, es que lo que a mí me abrió la cabeza de tu modelo es que se fija en la biología humana, en cómo nos resistimos aquí, ¿no? Entonces, cuando te das cuenta de cómo te estás resistiendo y cuando hablas de las 4 estructuras cerebrales, de repente te vuela la cabeza, ¿no? Como decimos en español. Eso es. Pues nada más, yo creo que os pedimos disculpas otra vez por el problema técnico que hemos tenido. Espero que os sirva esta conversación con Britt. Britt, gracias por tu tiempo. Sé que tienes una agenda ocupada. Y nada más, si quieres saber más sobre la gestión del cambio desde la neurociencia, desde la mirada de la neurociencia, pues cuenta con nosotros, cuenta con Brain Awareness Manager, con el equipo de Britt y con nosotros dos, con Margarita. Margarita, si quieres decirles algo final.
Agradecerles muchísimo su paciencia y su participación en esta sesión y estén pendientes porque seguramente le pediremos a Britt que nos comparta cosas nuevas. Siempre tiene algo muy interesante que poner por ahí.
Pues nada, muchas gracias. Chao, buenas tardes a todos.
Hasta pronto.